Para empezar nuestro siguiente panel sobre ambush marketing, quisiera llamar, por favor, a Paula Fernández Pfizenmaier, va a ser nuestra moderadora, a Paavana Kumar, a Juan Carlos Uribe, a Kelly Harris y a Juliana Albuquerque para que suban al presidium, por favor.
Champions of the world with this image of him like holding the World Cup. And a little detail, he has 438 million followers. That's 1 million more than Kim Kardashian. That's a lot. And I'm not saying that. Mark Zuckerberg is saying that. So he posted, World Post is now the most liked Instagram history, right? And WhatsApp also reached a record of 25 million messages per second during the final. So you can imagine that being an Argentinian company in that context, you will be tempted to take an advantage of that. So this is our imaginary situation as an in-house lawyer. The marketing people come to me and say, okay, we want to be part of the conversation in real time. We want to repost Messi's post. We want to tag Leo Messi and also tag the national selection official account. And we want more. We want to say congrats, Leo Messi, congrats, national selection, and congrats, Argentina, for winning the World Cup, right? And then we want to add a couple of hashtags, including hashtag World Cup, hashtag Selección Argentina, hashtag Messi, hashtag the company brand. So this is a situation for you, not an easy situation. So what I want to know from Kelly, from Paavana, and from Juan Carlos as external counsels, what would be your opinion? Would you give green light to this post? Would you suggest any edits, any changes? What are your thoughts on this?
Hello, there we go. I guess the first question is, do you have any sponsorship agreements with any of these people?
We are not official sponsors, no.
Okay, well, that makes things a little bit more complicated, I guess. I mean, I think, the first answer is that what's proposed is very high risk, and probably the same in all jurisdictions.
Yeah, I think I'd probably be making the face like in the meme that we have. I mean, I think that given that there's no sponsorship, at least in the US, you've got false association issues with the World Cup, you've got false association issues with Messi, you have right of publicity issues with having his name, you potentially have copyright issues if you're reposting the photograph, and then of course the additional layer of right of publicity from that. I would be interested in you guys' thoughts, rather than shooting it down completely, kind of removing what elements we don't really think are necessary, right? Do we really have to repost the post? Could we tie into the conversation without specifically mentioning his name or the World Cup? Is there a more organic way to do this that doesn't kind of hit all of the slam dunk trademark and right of publicity issues that we currently have in addition to the hashtags?
Juan Carlos? No, Juan Carlos.
Okay, I'll go for into this one. That's an interesting case because in many of our jurisdictions we don't have rules for ambush marketing. The closest that we come with is unfair competition. And unfair competition's got a degree, a nuance, let's put it, in which you must be competing. In the sense that just attracting some of the downpour of advertising that is going on, if it will be okay or not. So you have to put into action other ideas, which is the right of image. So can I use the name of Leo Messi? I mean, because he on his own is one thing. Another thing is proudly Argentinian. I'm a proud Argentinian. In a moment in which every Argentinian was proud. So is it really against any sort of public policy to be part of the vibe of the country in that moment? Another thing will be if I'm taking the name of the national team. I'm saying, or just saying, I'm very proud of my team, in very broad terms. So in the nuance context in which you put it will make a big difference if you cross the line or not.
So you could say that we can post congratulating the national selection, maybe not saying national selection because it's a
Exactly. It
trademark.
would be kind of designed around being sinuous.
And we could include, for example, Leo Messi in that post without maybe not reposting his post, but using his name.
Yeah, I wouldn't use his name, but I would say congrats to our captain.
Fair enough. So, Juliana, from your perspective, as from the regulatory side, if a third party challenged this post based on ambush marketing, what would be the outcome of that?
Well, one thing about ambush is that they are not normal actions. They are surprising actions. I was talking to a friend just before coming. She is not a lawyer, she's an advertisement professional, and she said this quote about ambush: "It steals the thunder." In this situation, I think it was an epic final. The whole world was watching, and a fierce dispute, the Argentina achievement, and the domain subject on social media. So I don't think it's reasonable to restrict brands to celebrate, but there are many ways, and I just agree, not using images and official names and trademarks.
Okay, perfect. So before going to the next question, do any of you have any questions with regard to this case? Or okay, so we continue. So what we want now is to know, better understand if there is any specific regulation on social media marketing and specifically regarding ambush marketing in each of your jurisdictions.
I'm happy to go first from Canada. We do not have a specific law that regulates social media advertising. Obviously, the terms of use of the platform will apply to anybody's use of it. But from a legal perspective, we have just general laws that prohibit making false or misleading representations in advertising. And those are federal laws that apply across Canada. And then we also have some more specific laws that apply in the context of consumer contracts. So if you're selling something to consumers and you make a false or misleading representation, then that can give consumers the right to rescind their agreement. The main issue with determining what is false or misleading advertising is exactly that. Is it in fact creating an association with a party that you don't have a formal contract with? And we use what's called the general impression test, which is, kind of looking at the entire advertisement on one time from the perspective of a consumer who is hurried and inexperienced. So really, the idiot in a rush, when they look at this, what would they think? Would they think that this brand has, a bona fide sponsorship with whatever it is that they're trying to make the association with?
Paavana?
Yeah, so the regime in the US is very similar. There's no specific social media laws, but of course you have the Federal Trade Commission's laws that govern general false and misleading advertising. Those also cover the use of endorsements and testimonials, which more colloquially is the use of influencers, so influencers disclosing their relationships to brands when they post on social media. And then in terms of ambush marketing, it's going to be that kind of IP analysis I was touching on with the Messi example. Copyright analysis, are we violating an individual's right of publicity by using their name in a commercial post without permission? And of course, most posts by a brand are going to be considered commercial speech. Are we potentially implying a false association with an entity that we don't have a relationship with, or implying a licensing association? Are we stepping on a competitor's toes? Is there a potential federal Lanham Act claim by a competitor saying that we're essentially writing off the goodwill of their post to promote our own brand? That's the analysis that we'll go through. And then to pick up on something that you said, Kelly, about kind of false senses of urgency and inciting consumers to take actions they might not take. In the US, the FTC is currently very focused on what they're calling dark patterns in digital advertising. which is essentially the use of deceptive design elements. It could be on an e-commerce website, but it could also be on social media, it could be on the metaverse, to basically trick or mislead consumers into taking an action they wouldn't otherwise have taken, or make a purchase they wouldn't otherwise have taken if they had all of the information. So I'm starting to really analyze that in social media as well, because I think the FTC will look at it in all contexts.
Yes, Juliana, if you want.
Yeah, it seems to be an overall situation, this lack of specific regulation, and we are facing that. This characteristic of being surprising or shocking, it finds a fertile soil social media, and ambush can be also carried out by paid for online advertisement, for example, on event-related targeting. But besides being or not ambush, I think the main question is how to restrict or to contest it, the roles in the content creation and targeting. This is the main question. The launch of our self-regulatory guidelines for influencers helped it a lot. We classified main situations and established reasonable and proportional measures.
Okay, but those are not mandatory, but just recommendations.
No. Yeah, they are recommendations, but they are pretty much respected. Okay. And I think they help the market to give security to and we have some cases judged based on that.
Perfect. And in
Well,
Colombia?
here, bear in mind that we're speaking about many situations, because ambush marketing is also a way of guerrilla advertising. It's one of the varieties. And certainly the digital background, it's ideal in many senses, but the digital media is a media as any others, and from the perspective of Colombian law, is the consumer regulations of honesty and clear claims and non-deceptive practices are also applicable. The problem is it's also contextual, in the sense that many of the advertisers do not want you to focus so much on the risk, but can I get out of it easy? Because if it's going to be something that will happen just for 2-3 days, most likely preventive injunctions will not even apply. The fact of damages will be very difficult to evaluate. They also ask you to take that into account within the whole analysis. Not just if we're going to be good boys, is can I be a bad boy and get out of any serious risk with it?
So if you're going to do like ambush marketing, do you think it's better to do it on social media where you can delete it very easily? Usually the content you generate is not that expensive as, I don't know, a advertising spot in traditional media. So you are, Juliana, for example, you are seeing more cases now in social media than in traditional media on ambush marketing?
Yes, totally. We have, and just to comment our mechanisms of enforcement, it is a public commitment of the sector, of advertisers, agencies, and media. So there is strong enforcement mechanisms, and I think we have this specialization to enforce, to know how to direct the recommendations.
Perfect, thanks. So next, we are going to go through different cases in the different countries on ambush marketing to see what is happening in real life. So this case is from Brazil, and Juliana, if you want to give us some context.
Okay, these two images are recent cases. The first image, the Fiat case. Fiat was a traditional sponsor of the top audience reality show Big Brother Brazil. But this year, General Motors, I'm seeing the building just behind, gained the sponsor code. But Fiat gave one car to the first comment, missing the brand as a sponsor. It went viral. Several other users comment pretending to be reward as well. And several brands enter in the conversation as Coca-Cola, LG, Motorola, Samsung, Mercado Livre, and even the official sponsor, General Motors. And it is a recent and huge case. The other one, the Budweiser case, Bud launched a campaign in the day of the final match of the UEFA Champions League. The competition was sponsored by its concurrent Heineken, and Bud gave free beer to all users that post the beer in front of the media transmission. In a few hours of promotion, several photos posted with the beer in front of the logo, the trademarks, and signals of the match, the event. My comment in advance, we consider two disruptive cases and examples on how digital environment is affecting regulation. The Bud case, it was decided having basis one item of our influencer guidelines about engagement. It says that it is irregular advertisement that proposes, stimulates, or awards irresponsible user-generated content.
Thanks. So next, Colombia.
Okay, this is an interesting case of how to design around and be associated with an event but not crossing the line. And it also requires some context. Obviously, during the World Cup, the home deliveries skyrocket. Everybody was asking to be sent the hamburger to their houses to go and watch the matches. The other thing is that everybody on the radio and the television, the discussion was about the alignment of the teams. Who should be on the front? Who should be on defense? How should be structured? I mean, the discussion, nobody cares about anything else. So they wanted to talk about football, but they couldn't talk about the World Cup. The word Mundial was also kind of tricky, and again, using the jerseys of the teams were not. But if you notice, they talk about how to mingle and make different combinations. And if you're going to be watching a match today, no indication of what matches, because the local team, the local series was going at the same time as the other one, so it could be many. So they structure this, and no brands on the, look, it says H2O, for example, water, not Coca-Cola, not anything that might be associated with the brands, but everybody knows that they're talking and is associated with the World Cup, and they managed to get out with it. This is a very clever way to do it.
Yes, sure. And I think that's the way to go, because no one can challenge that you speak about football. That is a passion for Latin America, so I think it's a great example. So this is an example for Canada, and I don't know if it's going to, it's working. Okay, perfect.
Okay. This is sort of opposite from what Juan Carlos was talking about. This is an example of an ambush that I guess succeeded because it's still up. So this is in the context of the Toronto International Film Festival just this past fall. And it's an Instagram post from what's called the Broadview Hotel, and it's a large hotel that has, it's pretty upscale, it's got some restaurants, it's an event space, people get married there, and it's also a hotel. And as you can see, they have the caption here, "We've got a lot in store for TIFF this year. Stay tuned for special food, drink items, and events, 1 week to go." And they've hashtagged TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, Broadview Hotel TO, 1 week special menu. So they went all in. And if you saw in the video, I don't know if we can play that again, the video, they have clips of celebrities, which seems to be taken from broadcast footage, which they probably did not license. Really don't think that they got any sort of endorsement deal from the celebrities that appeared. I think there was George Clooney and Bradley Cooper. And they also have the TIFF logo in the middle of the two little laurel leaves. They have their name and then the TIFF logo and then all of this unlicensed and probably formally sponsored content. And as you can see on the right side of the slide, those are the actual hospitality partners who paid TIFF to be the hotel that is associated with the festival. And so this was published in 26 weeks ago, so in the fall, and it's still up. And it's an example of risk, I think. I guess TIFF is not protecting its sponsors. Those sponsors are not monitoring, the TIFF hashtag to start out with. It would be very easy to find if anybody was looking for this. So I think it's a good reminder that there are some businesses out there that are willing to take the risk. They're willing to get the benefit from the ambush. And sometimes they can get away with it without paying for it. So, depending on the client and on the party that is going to be, ambushed, I wouldn't suggest doing this with the Olympics, for example, but there are some events and properties that you might be able to successfully ambush, and it might be worth the risk for some businesses.
Thanks. So next. So in the US, Paavana?
Yeah, so these examples are from a few years ago, but I think they provide a good counterpoint on risk and an example of when a brand could get away with it and it's actually worth the virality and the consumer engagement that results. So on the bottom right, Katherine Heigl sued Duane Reade for $6 million for posting a photo of her on Twitter, leaving a Duane Reade store and tagging her on social. It's a pretty slam dunk right of publicity claim. Katherine Heigl was known to be quite litigious, quite protective of her image. So that didn't go to court, but it would have been, really a slam dunk, and so it settled for a really high value. And then you've got on the top left, this is Arby's, who made this funny quote about Pharrell's hat looking like the Arby's logo when he was attending the Grammys. So you see they both tagged Pharrell, and they also did hashtag Grammys. Pharrell did not sue them for this post. In fact, he thought it was hilarious, and he reposted it, and they got a ton of engagement. So, if we'd been in a social media war room, I'd been advising the client, I probably would have said, hey, you have a really slam dunk right of publicity claim, you have a potential trademark issue with the Grammys, and they might say, we think Pharrell's the kind of celebrity that's going to lead into it, we have to take advantage of this moment, people are going to think it's funny, we're doing it during the Grammys, is he really going to complain, versus what is arguably a more bad faith effort on the part of Duane Reade for posting this paparazzi photo and doing something that's more likely to anger the celebrity. So just an example of, all companies are going to have social media guidelines in place. We work with our clients on those so they can take advantage of opportunities. In an ideal world, would they run every single tweet by legal? Yeah, but that's probably not going to happen. So we try to work with them on figuring out what do we think is high risk, medium risk, low risk, so they can make some judgment calls accordingly. Even if we think there is legal risk, the practical risks might differ.
Thanks. So when using influencers, for example, I know that in the case of the US, and I don't know, in Canada, I think it's the same, you have to disclose if there is a material relationship between the brand and the influencer. In Argentina, it's not mandatory to do so. It's recommended by the self-regulatory body. And you can have an interpretation of some consumer law that would take that conclusion too, but it's not specifically regulated. But what about in Brazil and in Colombia? Is it mandatory to disclose if there is a material relationship?
We have now, I would say, weird status in that the Superintendency of Trade and Commerce issued new guidelines for influencers in which it's advisable, they put it this way because they cannot issue regulations by themselves, just guidelines, to disclaim if they are presenting a good or a service on behalf of somebody else. If they apparently are sponsoring it, it's advisable to do. Still, what advisable really means in terms of do it, it's still open in the air.
In our consumer code, there is a provision say that the nature of advertisement must be clear to consumers. There isn't a specific provision saying it must be labeling as advertisement, but our influencer guideline says that it's advisable to label it.
But in your guidelines, for example, in Argentina, the influencer guidelines says it is recommended to do so, but it's not mandatory, so it's the same in Brazil.
Yes, it is. But the law says it needs to be clear that it's a commercial content. And the self-regulation, the guideline says it's advisable in this moment that it's very, you have content, editorial and commercial content. It's better to label it.
So perfect. So thank you. And for closing the panel, do you have any specific recommendations when you're doing marketing actions and you are not official sponsor, something to take into account?
I think the guidance I would give is that it's going to be a high risk, and the legal answer is probably going to be it's a high legal risk, and it's all about mitigating the practical risk in the ways that we've discussed.
I agree, and as I was mentioning before, I think having really robust social media guidelines and training internal to clients is important too, so that there is an understanding of what the risks are, and then depending on the company and their risk tolerance, they can kind of map out the worst case scenario and decide if it's a risk worth taking for the potential positive reaction that they might get. And so we can look at that on a case-by-case basis, but otherwise I agree with Kelly's view.
Yeah, I would say never use the other party's brands. Never use images whose copyright you do not own, and always use for the contextual cultural idea that somehow is projected, that at some point you can claim that nobody owns and you're just participating in a cultural discussion.
Well, I think it is a challenge for all of us. We used to receive a complaint of one piece of advertisement. Now each procedure has a lot of pieces of advertisement. My view is that regulation will undergo important transformation to keep pace with digital economy. I think it's going to rely on a set of measures, internal policies, codes of conduct, self-regulation, and I think that lawyers and law research have an important role on this transition.
Thanks. Bueno, gracias. Quería saber si tienen alguna pregunta. Si no, we are going to end the panel with this. Bueno, thanks all. It was very interesting to have your point of view.